procedure? Should we wait now, or should we just
I
have
would
people?
give it a couple minutes.
All right.
I'm gonna look at the live stream of the service and see where they, see how
There you
it's
go.
going.
At least in mass failings, but even knowing who the people that are, you want to really mobilize to, because you need, sometimes you need, these 4 people are going, and then I put out a note saying, okay, Katie and Sarah are going to look for them, carpool, or whatever it is, so you have a core who's interested in this. So I meant the top 15 that really, and it may be different, because Jackson's is
Yeah, they're just doing the Lord's Prayer right now at the service, so.
Yeah, very similar.
Oh, it's Cecil.
How long do we want to?
So they're about to start the final song.
Alright.
So they're probably gonna be 5 more minutes.
There was one other thing.
Is that due to the folks at home?
It's still, I've got a message up that says, like, the forum will begin shortly. So we're live right now, just with, so,
Oh, no, it
so
wasn't.
there shouldn't be too much stress for
It
people.
was, the note that says that you.
Let's start at 5 after, kind of.
That sounds great.
The person that had done the, and, yes, with arts, and then, I think the group that is receiving the proceeds of whatever's happening here is the Women's Prison Book Project. So that's
The
what
9
we're
o'clock
very
service
good.
tends to go later.
It's a power.
Kind
Take
of
a look
crazy.
at that. No,
There's only an
no,
hour
we're
in
doing-
between, so
It
what-
doesn't require any money. Cody's running it. Yes, and we want to have, we'll have our name, so in the new stuff, it'll be co-sponsored by Arts Board and Outreach. And that's and pretty much, and we would maybe then try to just get a few people there, just like we do here. It's at Plymouth, so it's just like, it's advertising, publicizing. That was, I talked about it in the almost that day, so I do associate that conversation with fireside. Well, we talked about that day, people say is like, we as a group, and we need to support each other even more, so we can't be joining this one.
So basically what we decided is we're gonna try to get
So that's, and that'll be a good thing in a way that we were all talking, because we talked about justice politics, more of that tightness on justice in the whole, rather than there's this little side, we're all doing this together to try to so we need to find a way to fund we should by service. Pretty much it's Karen, Kay, Eric.
Good morning.
So that actually,
like, I know that's a print,
so just check.
but I didn't.
She was like really concerned that he was going to start acting. I was like, well, that's what babies, that's their job, isn't it?
Why don't we, yeah, we can sit and see.
Very alert. And then, yeah,
It's all.
Yeah, so that.
Of course, he's the youngest.
to Plymouth Sunday Forum. We're very glad you're here, whether you're with us in the chapel here or watching from home. Just two brief housekeeping items. If you need a hearing assistance, there's a box on the table with hearing devices, and please don't hesitate to make use of them. Also, in the same vein, when you want to ask a question, please wait for the mic to be passed to you so the people at home, as well as all of us here, can hear the question clearly. This morning's presentation is sponsored by the Board of Outreach, and we're pleased to welcome our own Katie Dillon, who is Executive Director of Align Minneapolis, and also two members of her Street Voices of Change. Without further ado, Sarah Bergen, Chair of the Board of Outreach, will say a few words at the end of the presentation. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Katie.
Okay, are we on? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here this morning. Good to be with you all as always. We're going to take just a couple minutes to introduce ourselves, and then we'll jump into our presentation. So I know many of you know me. I'm grateful to be here. My name is Katie Dillon. I'm a member here at Plymouth Congregational. I'm the chair of the Housing Justice group here at Plymouth, and I am also the director of Align Minneapolis, which is 18 faith congregations and people with lived experiences of homelessness coming together to address homelessness. Just a super brief bit about my journey. I moved to Minneapolis in 2005 and was working for Target Corporation at that time. I was with them for 9 years before I was home with my son for a couple of years, and then went back to school for a master's degree in social work, which is how my winding path led me here to this work. I've done homelessness prevention as well as child welfare along the way, and I'm glad to be with you all.
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm new to Street Voices. I've been coming here for about a year and a half now, and it's been helping me to focus on getting housing and some kind of better my education, and just keep a positive attitude to come from out of being in poverty. Thank you.
First of all, my name is Stefan. I'm a writer, a sociologist, and an advocate for change. Not one day in my life when I left Chicago in 2009 did I ever think that I would be homeless. I came here within 2 weeks. I got 2 jobs. And I had an accident at the Target Center when a rafter ran over my feet. Being unable to work, being unable to even get around, I realized that homelessness is something you can't prepare yourself for until you're in it. And you realize once you're in it that you have a choice to make. You either rise or you fall, regardless if you have an apartment, if you stay in the shelter. Those are opportunities to grow and do better for yourself, and that's what we've done here. Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of Align, and then Leah and Stefan will just talk a little bit about Street Voices of Change. So as I mentioned, we're an interfaith coalition of 18 faith congregations and people with lived experience. We started in 2008 as downtown congregations to end homelessness. Plymouth was one of the founding members at that time, and it was born out of the group of downtown clergy that gets together once a month, recognizing, gosh, a lot of us are doing things related to homelessness. How could we come together and kind of combine our efforts? And so since that time, the organization has grown and has expanded beyond just the downtown core. And so in 2018, the name was changed from Downtown Congregations to End Homelessness to Align Minneapolis. I'll talk a little bit more about all the details of our work in a little bit, but Leah and Stefan, why don't you share a little bit about Street Voices of Change and who Street Voices is?
Well, the program for me is like my main focus to think about what I need to do. They help you with like even medical issues you have, or just trying to look for housing, better housing, adequate housing. That's been the problem, to find somewhere that's clean and decent. Sometimes you can find somewhere, but they like have issues there. They've been trying to solve that, like make a better communication with the clients and the people that work there. I don't think without Street Voices, I'd probably be lost somewhere, maybe, because they do so much advocacy for the clients, even to the welfare. I think you guys helped increase the money that they get. They increased the welfare because of Street Voices, where they were like, that's a big thing for people who are getting food stamps and fighting for better housing. So I think a lot of us would be lost if they didn't have like this program that helps us out. We wouldn't know where to go, what to do. No one's helping us. Doors are closing in your face, and then there's no one there to say, hey, what's going on? Without them, a lot of us would be lost.
Stefan again. Street Voices and Central Lutheran became what I call my sacred place of peace, where I could go and talk to people about situations, circumstances, and events that I was going through at that time. And after maybe the first 6 or 7 months, we started putting together an agenda. We wanted to get more washrooms, get the Bill of Rights passed. And in order to do that, you have to have a group of people who trust and believe in what's really going on. And that became my journey right there. If I was in town, I never missed a meeting while I was in town. I'll just say that. But Street Voices is a very, very unique organization. We are unique because we are a part of the homeless community. We have a greater understanding, a greater vision for change. Even though the finances is not there, that doesn't change the individual. So we put together these programs, and we went after the shelters for better treatment. We went after Target for putting down washrooms, and we finally got PV Plaza to actually respond by putting up a washroom for men and women. We've been to the Capitol, we've talked to senators, and everybody seems to think that this is an easy task, and it's not. We all want something better, and we all go out to get something better, and sometimes it doesn't work out the way you want it to work out. And it's a tedious process, because as an elder out of Chicago, I would have never in my life thought that I would be homeless. Never. And never would I even know how to prepare for it. I was just telling the young lady here that the first night I spent at the Salvation Army, I was my worst enemy, because I anticipated something before it even happened. And it never happened, because I understood that it was me that was initiating the fear, the phobias, and the insecurities, instead of just going in the shelter, waking up, going to work. And that became acceptable. But when Street Voices came along, we started out with maybe 18 people. But these 18 people had enough heart and courage to say, hey, listen, I mean, I'm here. I don't like being here. So what can we do to make a difference? First, we have to start on self. That's where it starts at. If you don't have the heart, the courage to accept the situation for what it is and do what's necessary to make it better.
All right, thank you. So I already went over a little bit of the history. I kind of want to dive a little bit into the data, just so that a lot of you are kind of up to date on the context of what we're, of our state and of our city. So Wilder, which many of you are familiar with, they do an annual statewide count. They also do a more in-depth analysis every few years. Their latest study that they completed in 2023 found that 10,522 Minnesotans were experiencing homelessness. The good news was this was down 7% from the record high in 2018, but it was still the second highest since they had started doing that study in 1991. So it's a pretty significant number, of course. A large portion of this number is children, because families with children, of course, do experience homelessness. And when you think about kind of who is experiencing homelessness, it really touches on every population. Children, families with children, young people, 18 to 24, they're kind of a contingent, as well as single adults, adult-only households. I will mention that older adults, age 55 and older, are actually the largest growing segment of people experiencing homelessness. A lot of this is due to rising costs of living, rising rents, and fixed incomes that do not keep up with those increased costs. Of course, not surprisingly, we see a disproportionate representation of people of color, and particularly Indigenous folks. It should come as no surprise that we have built a system that has historically marginalized and excluded these folks from opportunities for generational wealth, home buying, things like that. We've inflicted historical trauma onto folks, and they now are experiencing large rates of homelessness disproportionate to the general population. 7 in 10 people are experiencing homelessness are Indigenous. I also want to touch on what we call the gap in the units of affordable housing. So first, when we say affordable, what do we mean? We mean that somebody is only paying 30% of their income to housing, so that is what's considered affordable. And when we talk about affordable housing units, in Hennepin County alone, the estimate is that there is a gap of 35,000 units of housing that is affordable to low-income folks, so folks who are below the median income. We also know that because of this, especially gap in affordable units, many folks are what we call housing cost burdened, which means they are paying at least 50% of their income to housing. And the estimate is that 60,000 households in Hennepin County are cost burdened. And so you can, I'm sure you can imagine that what this means is that folks are having a really hard time making ends meet, making rent, and any small crisis or gap in finances or challenge in finances can lead to some really serious consequences, including homelessness. And I'll just mention that we will have time for Q&A at the end. I know we're on a little bit of a crunch timeline, but we will have Q&A, so certainly think about what questions you have, and we'll get into those later. So getting into a little bit more detail about Align's work, and then we're going to go into some more detail on the things that Leah and Stefan were touching on. We really, at Align, we really talk about what we call a multi-pronged approach to addressing homelessness. So on one end, we're talking about meeting immediate needs, and on the other end, we're talking about long-term systemic change. So when we talk about meeting immediate needs, we have an incredible network of congregations, many of whom do what we call direct service. So they're providing direct resources into the community. Mount Olive, for example, they have a diaper program and a household good program where they're helping folks who are really limited limited income, can't buy those things with food stamps, so they're making sure that people have the diapers and the cleaning products that they need. The Basilica of St. Mary, they have vouchers for free IDs, so that, you know, if folks need an ID to be able to get an apartment or get a job, they can get one for free. We have laundry vouchers at some of our direct service provider congregations. So just really trying to help folks get what they need in the community. That group does a lot of coordination among that group to make sure that are the needs being met? Are there things that folks are not getting in the community? Or if somebody shows up at Central Lutheran and Central Lutheran doesn't have that resource, how are we making sure that one of our congregations has that resource and that people know then how to get it? And so we're really doing a lot of that to make sure that all of the needs are met in the community. This group also oversees a couple of programs that we are self-run. One is Street Song Choir, an incredible group, which is people who have lived experiences of homelessness and people who do not have lived experiences of homelessness coming together to create community, have healing power that comes from music, sing songs rooted in justice and liberation, and then bring that music out into the community to inspire others. Really great group of folks that come together. And then we also have our own emergency rental assistance program, which is a small program when you compare to some of the larger state-run programs, but we feel like is really powerful and impactful. We are stepping in during a short-term financial crisis to help get folks caught up on rent. So that crisis might be a loss of a job, or maybe somebody lost hours because they were caring for a loved one, or somebody had an emergency car repair. And as I mentioned before, when folks' budgets are so tight, there's not a lot of wiggle room when a crisis comes up. And so if somebody gets behind on rent, our program can step in to get them caught up so they can be stable going forward, with the goal of preventing homelessness from occurring in the first place. Last year, 2023, we helped, I think it was 114 households, and we're on track to exceed that number for 2024. So really exciting there. On the other end of the spectrum, we talk about long-term change. So of course, the Street Voices of Change folks are going to talk more about the work that they do. We really look to them as our, leaders to identify what are the needs for this long-term change. We talk a lot about centering the voices of people with lived experience, because those of us who do not have lived experience, we need to hear from folks with lived experience about what are the needs, what works, and what do we need to be putting our power behind. And so really Street Voices is leading on what do we need to be working on. And then we take that and we do what we call our congregational organizing. And so we're going into our member congregations and we're trying to help people, understand more about homelessness, doing events like this where we're educating. We're trying to activate our folks in the congregations to do things like legislative advocacy and stand behind the work that Street Voices is wanting to do. We have goods drives where, like for example, right now we're gathering winter gear, cold weather gear for 2 of our member congregations that give that away to the community. So we're out there in our congregations just trying to make sure that we're leveraging the thousands and thousands of people within our congregations to get behind this work. And I mentioned legislative advocacy. We do local advocacy at the city level as well as at the state level. We don't do a ton federal level. Really a lot of our focus is on local and state level. We feel like that's where we can have the most impact. But we're always trying to understand what are those policy needs that can help meet the needs of the community. All right, so I'm going to hand it again over to Leah and Stefan to talk about some of the work of Street Voices in terms of some of those foundational values, which a lot of those they've already touched on, that community building aspect, and then talk about some of the work that they've done that has made change. So, who wants to grab the mic?
First of all, I want to go back to what I consider to be my pet peeve, which is education. And it is so very important because from the time when I was growing up, and there was places you can go after school, if your mother worked, this, that, and the other. Now, that's not happening. Our youth, speaking from African American, the African American youth today have no interest in education. Their education comes off Facebook, Twitter, and all of those things. They believe in that rather than actually believing in a college education. And it's a fact, it's not an assumption, it's a fact that at this rate, we have 3 more generations of homelessness, of crime, black on black crime, white on white crime, crime, period. So my thing is that if we can take the opportunity right now to understand how vitally important it is to educate these people. I sit on a committee heading home Hennepin, and I was just mind blown to find out that there were 270 families after COVID that were displaced, with 1,000 kids along with that. And nobody understands that feeling of a child looking up to his mother and saying, I don't like this. That's a feeling that will remain with that child for a lifetime if somebody doesn't step in and say, hey, listen, you understand how this works now. So if you prepare yourself for it by educating yourself, learning some skills, because right now, right today, like Katie said, let's say from 12 to 24, these kids don't have an 8th grade education. They rely on the streets. They trust more in the streets than they do in the classroom. And that's my job. That's what I think. You know, I love to write, but I can't anymore because of my nerve damage. But street voices, one individual doesn't make decisions. We have a set of rules. The rules make the decision. You have an opinion about it, but the rules make the decision. It must be everybody involved in the voting of who's coming, what's the agenda gonna be, and that affords everybody an opportunity to see different, feel different, and feel like they have someone out there that cares about them. Most of the homeless people that's out here now don't have families, not in this state, or anyone who would open the door for them. So what do? They trust in the streets, they trust in alcohol, they trust in drugs. And once they go so far, there is no turning back, because that becomes their inner security. That becomes their security blanket. So we try and make it possible as street voice. You come in and get you a breakfast, you ain't got to speak, but you can't help but hear. And once you feel comfortable enough to get involved, then the door is open. But we're always there for you to support you and respect you, and provide the little things that we can do. My thing is this: there's too many resources in the state of Minnesota not to have a collaboration, just like they have a handbook for the streets. There should be a handbook for resources, especially for those single mothers with 3-4 kids who have to work 2 jobs. There should be somewhere those kids can go and grow, not just stay at home, play video games. Those are the things that's necessary, because if they're not put in place right now, you're gonna see some real monsters later on down the line, because it's changing. And the state has the opportunity to make that happen. Not about who gets the most money, who gets the biggest grant. It's about collaboration. If there's something that you ask the Street Voices that we can't do, then we can refer you. We said, well, we don't have these resources, but here's what we can refer you to. And if you had the book to do that with, it would make things a lot more easier. Because I was explaining to her, you have the illiteracy program that's happening right now. People who are afraid and they become introverted. They don't want to talk to nobody, but they in need. And they feel like they can do things on their own. But every day your situation remains the same because of your lack of trust, because of the lack of respect that you have. And you slowly eat away at your own soul.
I was going to talk about the retreat that they sponsor for some of the clients. It's like for 4 days, and they train you on how they push for laws to be made, and how hard it is to get like politicians to even try to listen to some of the issues that they have. But I think that's I did have fun going, but I did learn a lot too, and I think that was very helpful, because sometimes you just think it's so easy when you just ask for, like, if we need help with more winter stuff, they really have to like go through different steps just to maybe get them to pass a few more dollars for grants. It's like kind of hard. I didn't even could think that, when you see somebody who's homeless, that it's like, oh, we'll put this much aside. But it's like, no, you really have to fight for just getting a little bit of extra money for the program. And so in my thoughts, I would like to see Street Voices one day have their own building. I know that they have to go from churches because they don't have a spot. They just have small grants that they get, and they do a lot with that for the homeless. But I'm hoping that maybe somehow they would get a good big sponsor, and they can have their own building, so people can really see firsthand how far they've come with helping homeless.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Leah. And just to touch on a few more things that Street Voices has been doing out in the community. So they have developed a really incredible relationship with Hennepin County, which has been really critical in kind of transforming the way that Hennepin County delivers services. So Hennepin County is the primary entity that provides services in the to answer the needs of the homeless community. They have grants that they work with community partners on for things like shelter and street outreach and things like that. But they also have built up an incredible couple of teams of housing case managers, folks who are out there within the shelters and on the streets connecting folks directly to housing. And that work is foundationally informed by the work of Street Voices of Change. Street Voices of Change has been telling the county, this is what folks need, this is what will work to get folks out, into housing, and the county listens. And so then there's this consistent feedback loop as well. How are things going? What are the conditions in shelter? So the county folks are coming to Street Voices meetings and listening to the experiences that people are having. So that kind of continuous feedback loop is incredibly important. They also have folks from Street Voices sit on their review panels for grants and for shelter contracts, so that people are, people who have lived experience and are out there, experiencing these services can actually have an influence on those. Street Voices of Change Speakers Bureau, Leah and Stefan are part of that, and that's why they're here today with you. That Speakers Bureau has folks out in the community speaking at things like the City of Lakes Rotary Club, doing staff trainings, going to the Capitol committee hearings. Tyra is another member of Street Voices who's here with us today. Hi, Tyra. She's been an incredible voice at the Capitol, sitting in committee hearings when bills are up. It's a huge it's a huge weight, and the gift that these folks bringing their voices, is just really powerful. I also want to mention that they received the Northern Light Award for Inspiring Organizational Leadership at the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless conference last year. It was a huge honor. And then, do you all want to talk about either the Shelter Residence Bill of Rights or storage or housing support reform? Yeah.
Now, here's the joy of Street Voices. When we sat down to talk about the Shelter Bill of Rights, it started out by the treatment that we were receiving in shelters. To be woke up out of your sleep saying that you got to leave because you're snoring too loud. If I knew I was snoring, I'd turn it off. But you don't know that. But so these are the problems that were happening during midwinter time. They would put you out of the shelter. No grievance form even mattered at that time because it was a family affair going through the shelters. Family members saying that you said this, you said that. Well, words ain't never hurt nobody, but you gonna put a man out in below zero weather? So we started, and from that bill, we figured out that there was a host of other things that needed to be done. Even though they haven't correctly done them, they've made an effort. So now it's our job, once again, to help shape and mold that. I'll give you a perfect example. They now consider us to be what we call lived experience. But every time you afford the advice needed, they go back in chambers and change it, rearrange it to suit their political, not ours. And as far as the housing goes, right now housing is trickled down, but every time you see these people, they're telling you about housing. Housing for a long time before you had case management was, they would put you in a building knowing that you couldn't deal with what was already in the building, and 30 days later you're out of a house, you're out of a roof over your head. And it was called change out. They would just go get somebody else who was homeless, put him in there, give him 30, 90 days, and put him back out. That's because of the grievance process. There was no accountability from the grievance process. I mean, you couldn't even go down to legal aid and get no help. But now they created these committees, what we call lived experience. I sit on the committee right next to Jacob Fry, and please don't take this the wrong way, it's just the truth. He knows nothing about homelessness. And when somebody tells him something, he has to be, in his own mind, well, how can I utilize this to benefit me? But it's not about you. You got a roof over your head, you got a job, and you got people that trust in you and believe in you and hope for you to do what you're supposed to do, not what you want to do. And that becomes a serious issue, because if we don't act as a collective entity, we all lose. Everyone loses. Facebook, Twitter, social media, period, not only influences our community, it can influence your community. It can influence your kids, because they're out here just like we are. They may have a home to go to at nighttime, but it's about the process. And that's why so many African Americans use that terminology, I'm not working for nobody. Well, if you don't work for somebody and you ain't got your own business, you just wrote your own sentence. You either going to jail or you're going to die in these streets. And that's neither one of those are healthy choices. So it's up to us as a group to figure out what can we do to better our situation, to better our kids' situation. And that's where I'm at. About education, about providing the resources necessary to restructure your life. And if it wasn't for street voices, I might be out on the corner. I might be using drugs. But since I do have some place to go, since I do have some people I can trust in, confide in, things have worked out a little bit better.
Thanks, Stefan. That was a beautiful segue into, I'm going to kind of wrap up so we have just a couple minutes for Q&A, and then I know Sarah needs to say her piece. So really, this is all about the work that we do together, and this includes you all here as part of one of our member congregations. So first of all, we need to see the humanity in each other, and that includes folks who are unhoused. We don't want, stigma and stereotypes getting in the way of this important work. So you all get to be part of that as well. You can go out into your communities and your circles to help break down those stereotypes. There's a little flyer that you can take if you want to about how to be an ally to people experiencing homelessness that includes some of that myth busting. So grab one on your way out. Really raising up the voices of people with lived experience because, again, they know what they need and we need to be listening to them. And then coming together. We have power when we're together. We have power when we're working as one and kind of have common goals. We're organizing, we're advocating for those changes that are needed, the solutions that we know work. So with that, maybe just a couple questions. We might have time for a couple questions before Sarah closes us out. I see John's hand in the back.
So I was very interested to hear about your conversations with Mayor Fry. I'm interested to hear if there's anything, any strategies that Align or others have come up with to get Mayor Fry to see some advantage to him in helping the people.
That is something that we have struggled with. We use an organizing model that relies on understanding where your power lies with the decision maker. And we have not found where our power lies with the decision makers such as Mayor Fry. We can have separate conversations outside of this forum about that, but really at this point, our steering committee, we're talking a lot about conversations around treatment of our neighbors in encampments. And at this point, we are really looking to the city council and the work that they are potentially going to be doing around the potential for safe outdoor spaces. So really looking to them as the decision makers that we need to be working with at this juncture as it relates to some of those ordinances around encampments. One of the, I think, good pieces is that when it comes to services, that really is county driven, not city driven. And so knowing that Street Voices has such a strong relationship with the county has been really helpful. We have not had that connection as well with the mayor's office, I would say. Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, there's only one good thing that has come out of Mayor Jacob Fry, and that came from Angela Connolly, who said that you have to have lived experience on these committees when you make decisions about homeless people while you stay in a mansion. So that's the one accomplishment.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit more to that, so there's a meeting called the Heading Home Hennepin meeting, which is co-chaired by Commissioner Angela Conley and Mayor Fry. They've now added a third co-chair, which is somebody with lived experiences of homelessness. So that's a really incredible addition to that group. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we have a question here, and then we can move to you.
The stigma piece up there is driven, I think, mostly by the public perception, both in the media and in the city, about the impact of encampments in the particular places they appear, in the neighborhoods and whatnot. Is there a solution appearing to a safe place for encampments, or encampments that don't have the impact on the neighborhoods where they are in, so that some neighborhoods are experiencing all the difficulties of encampments and others can just look at it?
Yeah, really good question. Yep. So I mentioned that the City Council is exploring what they call safe outdoor spaces. They actually just voted on Thursday to ask the City Attorney's Office to draft what could be a potential ordinance for safe, essentially sanctioned encampments is kind of a term that some folks use. There's a model like that in Colorado, and then there's also been a model like that in Duluth, although Duluth, that was for folks staying in their cars, so this would be a little bit different. But the City Council is looking to try to understand what could that look like in our city, because they've heard from constituents that have lived near where groups have been living outside, that there has been negative impact on those neighbors. And so trying to understand how could we try to meet everyone's needs and make it, and also, you know, for folks living outside, you know, how are they provided with things like public health measures, sanitation, trash service, things like that. Yeah, thank you. I did hear a question here. It looks like Kim has a question.
I was just saying, in particular, what would you like to come from Mayor Fry?
So the question is, what would we like to come from Mayor Fry? I think there's a lot of things that we would love the city to be doing. And I think one of those is particularly around the treatment of our neighbors in encampments, and understanding at a really deep level that closing encampments is incredibly harmful. That's not to say that there are not issues when there are folks living outside in community settings. But what we have heard from folks who have been part of encampment closures is that folks go into hiding, so their case managers cannot find them to connect them with housing. We've heard that folks are not following their safe use plans, and so overdoses spike, and overdose deaths spike. There's an incredible amount of resources that go into encampment closures, police time, city worker time, and so we're asking for a better answer. We don't necessarily know all of what those answers are, but we're asking for more collaboration, and that, you know, that's one of the things that we would like to see. Yeah, thank you. No. We haven't seen what we'd like to see in the collaboration. We've seen increased in violent closures of encampments. There was a question from Kim and then Hillary. Yeah.
Everybody in this group has heard the term NIMBY, I assume not in my backyard. There's a movement that's really going around the country that we're starting here in Minnesota. And in contrast to NIMBY, its acronym is YIGBY. And YIGBY stands for Yes in God's Backyard. And the concept is that the church, on its own property, has the right, the religious right, to provide services, housing, whatever people need on their property. And there's a basis for this in federal law, but the basis I'm talking about is religious freedom. And so, you know, we're working together, we're drafting legislation. We've got some churches, about 10 churches. We did a survey of people that congregations that want to do something on their land. But what I wanted to ask people in the front is, you know, we're wondering how we can, you know, incorporate services to the homeless on the church property as really part of this bill. Now, I don't know what you go through right now if you want to shelter people in your congregation. I suspect, you know, I'm not saying this is the ultimate solution. I suspect there's a lot of city regulations and rules that keep churches from doing this, even if they want to. And, you know, I don't know, I want to talk to some of the people up front about if they think this is a good idea or something that we should just focus on permanent housing.
Yeah, thanks for that. I wonder, would we maybe want to spend a little time after the forum today talking? And then that way we can have some time.
My one question is, are there a lot of difficulties and obstacles for a church doing this in Minneapolis at this time?
I mean, some of our congregations that are part of Align have worked on housing on their own properties, and the one big thing is money, and bringing together multiple sources of funding to actually get the development going. Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Hillary had a question, and then let's turn it over to Sarah.
I just wanted to follow up on, the encampments and the city's approach. I think it seems like it's especially finding a more humane way of handling encampments. Like the city of Minneapolis just seems to have a very inhumane approach of like very short notice, often arriving at 6 a.m., clearing camps, throwing everything out, throwing everybody's belongings and tents and sleeping bags out. And it's just, compounding the generational trauma that many of the unhoused folks have already experienced. And I'm just wondering, I remember there was an encampment in the Seward neighborhood not far from where I live, and this was back when Cam Gordon was the city council rep for the area, and he worked with various service organizations, especially in the Native American community, because a lot of the people in that encampment were indigenous, to set like a timeline with the landowner, and like they spent a month with, having pop-up tents, services, community coming there to basically like find options for everybody. And they were able to get almost everybody placed in housing, and there's always some percentage of people who just don't want to be housed, but like finding still support services. And that just seemed like, to me, I always have held that up as like, that is the approach we should be taking with every encampment when it hits that point, because often they're fine until there's this tipping point where there's too many overdoses or drugs or crime or something starts impacting the surrounding neighbors, and where people who live in that area are not feeling safe, or the encampment itself isn't feeling safe to those who are living there. And so I don't know why it's been so difficult for Minneapolis to kind of like embrace that more humane approach. Can you comment on that? Or like, because I feel like in St. Paul, they don't handle it this way.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching exactly on what we talk about in terms of the human piece, and the fact that folks are people deserving of care, and not these violent, inhumane approaches. And I would just mention that we do have a statement on our website. It's a couple years old now, but still extremely relevant, about the treatment of our neighbors in encampment, and a lot of what you touched on is noted in there. I don't know that I have an answer to like, why has Minneapolis been doing it this way, or like, why has it been so inhumane? It's so hard to know, and I just, without a clear process, and without a clear, clarity of what are the options, it just seems like it's been put under the Department of Regulatory Services, and then it's just reactive. And so I just don't think it has been an intentional approach.
I think it's just about expediency and serving the constituents who are, the homeowners,
Sure.
instead of the unhoused.
Yeah, thanks. So I am going to turn it over to Sarah. Oh, okay, Stefan and then Sarah.
I just want to say that's selling fear is what Jacob Fry does, because if you have an encampment and you put running water, toilets, so the community won't have to deal with looking out their window seeing you in the alley using the washroom. It's almost like you're saying that it's contagious. Get these people away from me before I catch it. And it's not. Nobody plans to be homeless.
Well, first, on behalf of the Board of Outreach, just want to make sure we thank everyone for coming and for listening and spending your time today. But most importantly, thank you to Stefan and Leah and Tyra and Katie for sharing your stories, for educating us, and for your work for change. It's critically important, and we thank you. This is a time of year when we're reflecting on what we can give and thinking forward. We know Plymouth is engaged in housing justice work throughout the year through various partners, Align being one of them, working on various aspects of housing justice, working with Simpson for more dignified shelter, working with Habitat for Humanity to build more homes, with Beacon and other organizations working on affordable housing, trying to spend time with Zamia and other organizations that are also doing performances and bringing awareness of lived experiences. And I just think back to, Stefan, what you were saying, and in learning and working together and knowing where the resources are and the work we can do through Plymouth to help both enhance this important work, work together to enhance the work collectively, and also lift the voices of those that need to be heard, particularly with our politicians and otherwise, through activism that we can all participate in. But as we brace for what may be a harsh winter in many ways, and think about the Christmas season, we are asking that you contribute what you can to the Christmas offering that will support the work that Plymouth is doing with all of these incredible partners, and hope that you will give generously. We also encourage, many of you do this regularly already, but that you come out and participate in various things we're doing. Just this coming week, on Thursday, there's the Homeless Memorial March here at Plymouth. That'll start here, honoring and celebrating the lives of those who have passed this year with lived experience of homelessness. And I think another partner organization, Zamia, is celebrating their 20th anniversary on Saturday at the Hennepin County Library downtown at 2 p.m. So there are many ways to not only give of your treasure, but of time and talent, and continue to learn more and continue the fight for housing justice. So appreciate you all coming very much. Thank you.
I might be the only one here who doesn't recognize you. I just don't know who you are.
I'm Sarah Bergen. I'm part of the Board of Outreach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. You educated us well and inspired us for sure. Please come back next Sunday, which will be the last forum of the year. And our speaker that day is Bertie Cunningham, a respected expert on the subject of dealing with grief. And in this holiday season where things can be hard on those of us who are grieving, she will give us her insights and a very valuable presentation, I know. So please come back, and thank you for this day and for your time this morning. If you're going to the service, would you please enter quietly, because I think they've already begun there. Thank you.